Hey everybody. So in the previous video you watched me create this integration which could now run as a Node.js application given that this is TypeScript in our own servers. However, I'd actually like it to run on the Poly server. So Poly has the ability to run server-side custom functions which can actually be managed more easily. They can go to sleep, so they're extremely resourceful. And they run in Kubernetes. So you basically have the benefit of infinite scaling and resource management through Kubernetes with all of this runtime traffic. Not to mention all the additional monitoring, logging, and additional operational capabilities that come through the great tooling that's associated with Kubernetes. So to take this function and deploy it to the server, I'm going to first do just a couple of little things. So one thing I want to do is I want to go ahead and disable this event handler, because the approach to receive events on the Poly server is a little bit different, and I'll show you that in just a bit. Additionally, there is one more submodule that I'd like to incorporate, which is called Poly Custom. And what Poly Custom does is it's kind of a grab bag for interactions between the container applications and the Poly web server to allow the container to have a better interface to the rest of the world. So the one we'll use in this case, and it's a little bit more advanced and nuanced, so don't worry about understanding it too much at this point. Just note that instead of just logging the response status, I would like to actually go ahead and do the following. I'd like to use Poly Custom. Let's do Poly Custom dot, and then in here, I'm going to go ahead and actually just use the response status code, and I'm going to set that to be the order response status code. And so this is basically the approach that Poly will have to be able to then kick back whatever status code we have here, or whatever status codes we want to set based on an error or edge case, etc. We can now kick that up to the trigger mechanism, which I'll show you in just a second, to be able to then pass back to the original caller. So with that, the only other thing I want to do is kind of follow best practice, which is to write the command to deploy this function kind of at the top of the function so I don't get confused and accidentally deploy it to the wrong context or have a typo, etc. So I'll just do npx poly function add, and then we'll add this specific function, and we'll add it from the integration.ts file, and we'll put it inside a context of, let's call it, logistics dot integrations, and then we'll make this a server-side function, -- server. Cool. So we'll basically take this command, we'll go ahead and run it, and this will basically go ahead and deploy our integration to the server. Great. So it's adding the function to the server. Awesome. So here we have a function ID. And at this point, the best practice would be to actually go ahead and test this function, make sure it works as expected, make sure you're still getting the status code. However, I'm just going to run with it. I'm going to be confident that it's going to work okay for us. And let's head over to Postman. So here we are in Postman. And here, to create a trigger, you basically are mapping a webhook handler ID to a server function ID. So we have the server function from the deployment we just did. And the webhook handler ID, we'll go ahead and go to our get webhooks endpoint and hit send. And we'll see that in this demo, we only have one webhook registered to the Poly server. And that's actually the right one because it's, partner one .orders on order create. So I'll go ahead and copy this ID and I'll paste it in here. And then we'll give our trigger a name just so we can remember. So let's call it the trigger for partner one integration. An additional thing we'll do real quick is just confirm that we want to wait for a response. What this means is it's not a fire and forget pattern. this is a request response pattern, meaning that when this trigger fires off a custom function, it's going to actually wait for a response, and then it's going to kick that response back to the sender. So we'll go ahead and have it set to be true. We won't notice anything different. It's still going to be a 201, but yeah, we'll go ahead and have that set to true. One thing I need to correct here is the name cannot have any spaces. I just remembered. So we'll just do something like this. And we'll hit send, and we have our webhook trigger. So now, technically, what this means is that that event listener function for the webhook is linked with the custom function that we just deployed. So if we go ahead and execute that webhook now, we should see a response coming back, and it's just going to basically be a 201. Okay, so just like expected, this is what it returns. Now, if we want to see something in the payload, this is not a great practice. However, just to show it working, if we wanted to do a return statement here, and I'll go ahead and just return success, and then we have to just update our promise to be a string, and we'll go ahead and hit save. We'll redeploy this function. Great, same function ID. We don't have to touch the webhook, we don't have to touch the trigger, meaning we've now updated real time that custom function that's serving this integration. And in Postman, if we fire it off again, we'll see that this time we get a success message in the response as a string. So that concludes building an integration using Polly. I hope you've enjoyed this series of videos, and the next one is going to be around some operational capabilities that allow you to kind of run and manage these operations well.